Hello, and welcome to Introduction to Cyber Attacks for Beginners, How to Think Like a Hacker. My name is your AI Master Teacher, and I'll be your guide through this journey. Over the next several modules, we are going to pull back the curtain on the world of cybersecurity. We will explore not just what cyber attacks are, but how they are planned and executed, step by step. Our goal is to equip you with the foundational knowledge to see the digital world through the eyes of both an attacker and a defender. By the end of this course, you will not only understand the structure of a sophisticated cyber attack, but also know how to analyze the evidence it leaves behind. Let's begin. Module 1. The Attacker's Mindset and the Art of Reconnaissance. Start of Lesson 1.1. Good day, everyone. Welcome to our first session, Lesson 1.1, The Cyber Kill Chain, a Hacker's Roadmap. Imagine trying to plan a heist. You wouldn't just show up and hope for the best. You'd have a plan, scope out the location, figure out how to get in, disable security, get the goods, and escape. Cyber attacks are no different. The cyber kill chain is the step-by-step roadmap that attackers follow to go from zero access to achieving their goals. Understanding this map is the first step to defending against them. Our learning objective for this lesson is to define the cyber kill chain and list its 7 phases in the correct order. We will define the cyber kill chain model and then briefly introduce each of its 7 distinct phases, establishing the framework for the entire course. Now let's move into the core content. What is the cyber kill chain? It's a cybersecurity model developed by Lockheed Martin that breaks down the structure of a cyber attack into a sequence of stages. For defenders, its value is immense. By understanding the stages, you can identify and break the chain at any point, stopping the attack. There are 7 phases. Reconnaissance, the attacker gathers information on the target. Weaponization, the attacker creates a malicious payload, like a virus-infected file. Delivery, the attacker transmits the weapon to the target, perhaps via a phishing email. Exploitation, the weapon is triggered, exploiting a vulnerability to execute code. Installation, the malware installs itself to maintain access. Command and control. C2. The malware creates a channel for the attacker to control the system remotely. Actions on objectives. The attacker finally achieves their goal, like stealing data. Now that we've laid the theoretical groundwork, it's time to see it in practice. Let's map a real-world breach to these phases. Consider the 2013 Target data breach. Here's a summary. Attackers gathered network credentials from a third-party HVAC vendor that worked with Target. They then used these credentials to send a phishing email containing malware to Target employees. An employee opened the attachment, which exploited a vulnerability and allowed the attackers to gain a foothold on the network. From there, they moved to point-of-sale or POS systems to install malware designed to steal credit card data. How does this map to our kill chain? Gathered network credentials from a third-party HVAC vendor is clearly the reconnaissance phase. Send a phishing email containing malware is the delivery phase. Opened the attachment which exploited a vulnerability is the exploitation phase. And finally, install malware designed to steal credit card data covers the installation phase and hints at the final actions on objectives. Excellent. To conclude our lesson, let's do a brief assessment. Can you list the 7 phases of the cyber kill chain in order and describe the goal of each in a single sentence? The correct answer is reconnaissance, gathering information; weaponization, creating the malware; delivery, sending the malware; exploitation, triggering the malware; installation, establishing persistence; command and control, creating a remote control channel; actions on objectives, achieving the final goal. And that wraps up our first lesson. We've established our roadmap. Next, we'll dive into the first and perhaps most important phase, reconnaissance. Welcome to Lesson 1.2, Reconnaissance, gathering intelligence. Before an attacker writes a single line of code, they become a detective. They search public records, listen to conversations, and even rummage through digital trash to learn everything about their target. This intelligence gathering, or recon, is often the difference between a failed attempt and a devastating breach. Our learning objective today is to differentiate between passive and active reconnaissance. We will define both primary types, exploring passive methods that are hard to detect and active methods that are riskier for the attacker but yield more detailed information. Let's begin. Reconnaissance, or recon, is the first and longest phase of an attack, focused on understanding the target. The goal is to discover potential vulnerabilities, employee information, and network infrastructure details. There are two main types. The first is passive reconnaissance. This is the art of gathering information without directly interacting with the target's systems. It is stealthy and virtually undetectable. Examples include whois lookup, finding the registration details for a domain name. Google Dorking, using advanced search operators in Google to find sensitive files or login pages. OSINT, or open source intelligence. Scouring social media like LinkedIn for employee names, news articles, and public records. The second type is active reconnaissance. This involves gathering information by directly interacting with the target's systems. This is louder and risks detection. Examples include ping sweep, sending a ping to a range of IP addresses to see which hosts are online. Port scanning, using a tool like Nmap to check which network ports or digital doors are open on a server, revealing what services are running. Now, let's put this knowledge into practice with a challenge. Imagine you are targeting ACME Corp with the domain acmecorp.com. How could you craft 3 different Google Dorks to find specific information? Here are some examples. To find any PDF files on their website, you could use site acmecorp.com, file type PDF. To find any login pages, you might try site acmecorp.com, in URL login. And to find any subdomains, you could search for site *acmecorp.com minus site www.acmecorp.com. This shows how powerful passive recon can be. To conclude our lesson, a quick assessment. An attacker runs an Nmap scan against a company's web server. Is this an act of passive or active reconnaissance? This is active reconnaissance. The attacker is using Nmap to send packets that directly interact with the company's server. This interaction is not anonymous and can be logged and detected by the target's security systems. Excellent work! In our next module, we'll move down the kill chain to see how an attacker uses this intelligence to build and launch their attack. Module 2. Crafting and Launching the Attack. Welcome to Lesson 2.1, Weaponization, Building the Malicious Payload. An attacker's intelligence is useless without a weapon. In the digital world, this weapon isn't a physical object, but a piece of code. The weaponization phase is the evil workshop where an attacker combines a vulnerability with a malicious action to create a payload. Our learning objective for this lesson is to differentiate between malware, exploit, and payload. We will define these 3 critical terms and explain how they are combined into a single deliverable weapon. Let's get into the core concepts. First, a vulnerability is a weakness or flaw in a system. Think of an outdated version of Windows. An exploit is the piece of code written specifically to take advantage of that vulnerability. It's the key designed for a specific lock. Malware is the malicious software, like ransomware or a keylogger, that the attacker wants to run. And the payload is the part of the malware that performs the malicious action. It's the exploit's cargo. So how does it all come together? Imagine an attacker discovers a target is using a vulnerable version of Microsoft Word. They find or create an exploit for that vulnerability. They want to steal passwords, so they choose a keylogger, which is a type of malware. They then combine the exploit and the keylogger into a single malicious Word document. This document is the weaponized payload. Let's deconstruct another scenario. An attacker creates a malicious PDF file that, when opened, takes advantage of a bug in Adobe Reader to install ransomware on a victim's computer. What are the key components here? The vulnerability is the bug in Adobe Reader. The exploit is the code that takes advantage of that bug. The malware is the ransomware itself, and the payload is the entire package, the code that the exploit delivers to install the ransomware. To wrap up, let's assess our understanding. In your own words, what is the relationship between an exploit and a payload? Why does an attacker need both? An exploit is the how. It's the code that takes advantage of a system's weakness to gain entry. The payload is the what. It's the malicious code that the exploit delivers. An attacker needs the exploit to open the door and the payload to do the damage once inside. Great job! Now that we've built our weapon, the next lesson will cover how we get it to the target.
Welcome to Lesson 2.2, Delivery: How Attackers Send Their Malware. A perfectly crafted weapon is useless if you can't get it to the target. The delivery phase is all about logistics. How does an attacker get their malicious payload from their computer onto the victims? They use methods that prey on human curiosity, trust, and urgency. Today, our learning objective is to identify 3 common delivery methods used by attackers. We'll explore the most common and effective vectors, focusing on phishing emails, infected USB drives, and watering hole attacks. Let's look at the most common delivery vectors. Phishing emails. This is the most common method. Attackers craft emails that look legitimate, impersonating a trusted source like a bank or a boss. The email contains a malicious attachment or a link designed to trick the user into clicking. Infected USB drives. A physical attack. An attacker leaves a malware-infected USB drive in a public place like a parking lot. Curiosity leads an employee to plug it into their work computer, which then becomes infected. Watering hole attacks. A more targeted approach. The attacker identifies a website that a specific group of people visits frequently. They then compromise that legitimate website and inject malicious code. When the victims visit the site they trust, their computers are silently infected. Now, let's see if you can spot a phish. You receive an email from Scott with the subject, invoice, and a Word document attached. The email says, "Hi Nancy, please review." You notice Scott's email address is scott@companyb.com instead of scott@companyb.com. What is the primary red flag here, and what delivery method is being used? The primary red flag is the misspelled domain in the email address, companyb.com with a Y instead of companyb.com. A single letter difference is a classic trick. The delivery method is, of course, a phishing email. For our final assessment, how would you describe a watering hole attack, and why is it considered so stealthy? A watering hole attack is when an attacker infects a legitimate website that they know their target victims visit often. It is stealthy because the victim is not being actively targeted with an email or message. They get infected simply by performing their normal activity of visiting a website they already trust. Excellent. The weapon has been delivered. Next up, the moment of detonation.
Welcome to Lesson 2.3, Exploitation: Triggering the Trap. The malicious email has been delivered. The victim, thinking the attached invoice is legitimate, double-clicks to open it. In that single click, a hidden war begins. The exploitation phase is the moment of detonation, where the delivered payload is executed, the system's vulnerability is triggered, and the attacker gains their initial foothold. Our learning objective is to define the role of the exploitation phase and describe what happens immediately after a successful exploit.
We will define this detonation phase and introduce the concepts of privilege escalation and lateral movement. So, what is exploitation? It's the action of running the malicious payload to leverage a vulnerability. For example, a user opens a malicious Word document. A macro inside the document runs, exploiting a flaw in Microsoft Word to execute ransomware code. Once the exploit is successful, the attacker's work has just begun. Their immediate goals are to gain more power and move deeper. First, they perform privilege escalation. The attacker often gains access as a low-privilege user. Their first goal is to exploit other vulnerabilities inside the system to become an administrator or root user, giving them full control. Next, they perform lateral movement. The attacker's ultimate target might not be the laptop they first infected. They use the compromised machine as a beachhead to scan the internal network and move laterally to more valuable targets, like servers containing customer data. Let's run a thought experiment. An attacker infects a marketing intern's laptop via a phishing email. The company's payroll server is on the same internal network but is not connected to the internet. How would the attacker use lateral movement and privilege escalation to get to that server? First, they would likely use privilege escalation to gain administrator rights on the intern's laptop. From there, they would perform lateral movement by scanning the internal network from that machine. Once they discover the payroll server, they would use their foothold on the intern's laptop to launch an attack against the server, eventually compromising it as well. To conclude, what is the primary difference between exploitation and installation? Exploitation is the initial act of running the payload to gain access to a system for the first time. Installation is the subsequent act of setting up a persistent backdoor so the attacker can regain access later, even if the system is restarted or the original vulnerability is fixed. And with that, we conclude Module 2. In our next module, we'll explore how attackers solidify their control and maintain it for the long term.
Module 3. Gaining Control and Maintaining Access. Starting Lesson 3.1. Installation and Persistence, Setting Up a Permanent Backdoor. Welcome to Lesson 3.1. Installation and Persistence, Setting Up a Permanent Backdoor. Gaining access to a system is a major victory for an attacker, but it can be temporary. What if the victim reboots their computer? What if a security update patches the vulnerability they used? The attacker would lose access. The installation phase is about changing the system to ensure they can always get back in. It's like a burglar making a copy of the house key after breaking in. Our learning objective is to define persistence in cybersecurity and identify 2 techniques attackers use to achieve it. We'll explore how attackers ensure their access survives reboots and patches. Let's begin. What is persistence? Persistence is the technique of creating a permanent foothold on a system. The goal is to ensure the malware remains active and can be accessed by the attacker even if the machine is restarted or the initial entry point is closed. There are several common persistence techniques. Registry modifications in Windows. Attackers add entries to the run keys in the Windows registry, which tells Windows to automatically launch their malware every time the system starts. Scheduled tasks. Attackers create a hidden scheduled task that runs their malicious program at specific times, blending in with legitimate system processes. Rootkits. This is a stealthy type of malware designed to hide its own presence and the attacker's activity from the user and even from some security software. Now for a practical thought exercise. You are an attacker who has just gained access to a Windows computer. You want your malware, evil.exe, to run every time the computer starts. Using what you just learned, which persistence mechanism would be the most direct way to achieve this? The most direct way would be a registry modification. By adding the path to evil.exe to one of the registry's run keys, you ensure the operating system will execute your program on every boot. To wrap up, let's assess. Why is persistence so important for an attacker? What two problems does it solve for them? Persistence is crucial because it ensures long-term control. It solves two major problems. One, it allows their malware to survive a system reboot so they don't lose access. Two, it allows them to maintain access even if the original vulnerability they exploited is discovered and patched by a security update. Fantastic! The attacker is now dug in. Next, we'll see how they phone home for instructions.
Welcome to Lesson 3.2, Command and Control, C2, the Puppet Master's Strings. The attacker's malware is installed and persistent. Now what? The malware is just a sleeper agent, waiting for orders. The C2 phase is where the attacker establishes a hidden communication channel to the infected machine, allowing them to send commands and receive stolen data. The victim's computer has become a puppet, and the C2 server holds the strings. Our learning objective is to define a command and control server and explain how attackers use DNS and HTTP to hide their communications. We'll analyze how they leverage common internet protocols to disguise their malicious traffic. Let's start with the C2 infrastructure. The C2 server is a server controlled by the attacker that sends commands to and receives data from infected computers. A network of these infected computers is called a botnet, and it can be used to launch massive attacks. To avoid being blocked by firewalls, attackers need their C2 communication to look like normal internet traffic. They do this in two main ways: HTTP/HTTPS. The malware sends data back and forth to the C2 server disguised as regular web browsing traffic. To a firewall, it just looks like the user is visiting another website. DNS tunneling. This is a more advanced technique where the malware encodes commands and stolen data into DNS requests, the protocol used to look up website IP addresses. Since all computers need to use DNS, it's very difficult to block this traffic. Let's apply this. A security analyst sees a computer on their network making hundreds of DNS requests to a strange, non-existent domain like a1b2c3d4.evil-attacker.com. What is likely happening here, and what C2 technique is being used? This is a classic sign of DNS tunneling. The long randomized subdomain is likely encoded data being sent to the C2 server, and the malware is using the DNS protocol as its hidden communication channel. To conclude our lesson, what is a botnet and what is the role of the C2 server within it? A botnet is a network of computers that have been infected with malware and are under the remote control of an attacker. The C2 server is the central brain of the botnet. It's the server that the attacker uses to issue commands to all the infected computers simultaneously and receive stolen data back from them. Great work! The Puppet Master is in control. In our final lesson for this module, we'll see what the attacker actually does with that control.
Welcome to Lesson 3.3, Actions on Objectives, the Attacker's End Goal. The attacker has gone through all the previous stages: recon, weaponization, delivery, exploitation, installation, and C2. They have full, persistent control. Now it's time for the payoff. The final phase, actions on objectives, is where the attacker finally accomplishes what they came for. Our learning objective is to list at least 3 common goals an attacker might have after compromising a system. We will explore the various end goals of a cyber attack to understand the attacker's motivation. This phase represents the why of the attack. What did the attacker want? Here are the most common objectives. Data exfiltration. This is the most common goal. The attacker collects and steals sensitive data, such as credentials, personal information, financial data, or intellectual property. Ransomware deployment. The attacker encrypts all the data on the victim's systems and demands a ransom payment in exchange for the decryption key. Destruction. Some attackers simply want to cause damage. They may corrupt data, wipe hard drives, or disrupt critical operations. And lateral movement to another target. Sometimes the first compromised system is just a stepping stone to a more valuable target.
Let's test this knowledge. Try to match the actions on objective with the most likely attacker motive: financial gain, espionage, or disruption. Encrypting a hospital's entire patient database. Stealing the secret formula for a new soft drink from a competitor. Wiping the servers of a government agency during a political conflict. Let's see how you did. Encrypting a hospital's database is a classic ransomware scenario, motivated by financial gain. Stealing a secret formula is corporate espionage. Wiping government servers is an act of pure disruption. For our final assessment, an attacker steals 1 million credit card numbers from an e-commerce company and deletes the company's backups. What two objectives did the attacker achieve? The attacker achieved two objectives. 1. Data exfiltration, by stealing the credit card numbers, and 2. Destruction, by deleting the backups to cause maximum damage and prevent recovery. This completes our journey through the cyber kill chain. In the next module, we're going to flip the script and learn how to think like a defender.
Module 4, The Defender's Lens, Analyzing the Attack. Welcome to Lesson 4.1, Indicators of Compromise, IOCs, the Digital Breadcrumbs. Every action an attacker takes leaves a trace, like footprints in the snow. For a cybersecurity professional, these traces are called indicators of compromise, or IOCs. They are the digital breadcrumbs that allow us to detect an ongoing attack or investigate a past breach. Learning to spot IOCs is the first step in digital forensics. Our learning objective today is to define indicator of compromise and list 4 common types of IOCs. We'll cover what they are and why they're so important for cyber defense. So what is an indicator of compromise? An IOC is a piece of forensic data or evidence that points to a potential security breach on a system or network. Let's look at the most common types of IOCs. Malicious IP addresses. An IP address known to be used by an attacker, for instance, for a C2 server. Suspicious domain names. Domains created for malicious purposes, like phishing or C2 communications. File hashes. A unique digital fingerprint for a file. Security companies maintain databases of hashes for known malware. If a file on your system matches a known malware hash, it's infected. Unusual network traffic. Anomalies in network patterns, like a computer communicating at 3 a.m. or data being sent to an unusual country. Unauthorized logins. A user account logging in from 2 different countries in a short period of time. Now, let's put you in the analyst's chair. You see an alert showing that an employee's computer has established a connection to an IP address located in a country your company does not do business with. What type of IOC is this, and what phase of the cyber kill chain might it represent? This is an unusual network traffic IOC. Given that it's an outbound connection to an unknown foreign IP, it could very well represent the command and control C2 phase, where the malware is phoning home. For our assessment, what is a file hash and how does it help a defender identify malware? A file hash is a unique digital fingerprint generated from a file's contents. It helps a defender because security researchers have large databases of hashes for known malware. A defender can calculate the hash of a suspicious file and compare it against this database. If there's a match, they can confirm the file is malicious without ever opening it. Excellent. We know what to look for. Next, we'll learn about the tool we use to find these breadcrumbs.
Welcome to Lesson 4.2, Introduction to PCAP Analysis with Wireshark. To find IOCs on a network, you need a way to see the traffic. Imagine being able to pause time and inspect every single piece of data flowing in and out of your computer. That is what a packet capture does. Wireshark is the world's most popular tool for this. It's like a microscope for your network.
Our learning objective is to define PCAP and identify the function of the source IP, destination IP, and protocol fields in Wireshark. We'll do a high-level overview of this essential tool. First, what is a packet capture, or PCAP? A PCAP file is a recording of all network traffic that passed through a network interface at a certain time. Analyzing a PCAP allows us to reconstruct conversations and investigate security incidents. Wireshark is the free tool that takes a PCAP file and displays the traffic in a human-readable format. When you open a file in Wireshark, you'll see several key columns. Source IP, the IP address of the computer that sent the packet. Destination IP, the IP address of the computer that received the packet. Protocol, the language the computers are using, like HTTP for web browsing or DNS for domain lookups. Info, a summary of what the packet contains. This is often the most valuable column for a quick analysis. Let's practice reading a conversation. Look at this simplified Wireshark line. Time, 10.5. Source, 192.168.1.50. Destination, 8.8.8.8. Protocol, DNS. Info, standard query for www.google.com. Who is talking to whom, and what are they asking for? The computer at the source IP 192.168.1.50 is talking to the destination IP 8.8.8.8, which is Google's public DNS server. The protocol is DNS, and the info column tells us it's asking for the IP address of www.google.com. To conclude our lesson, you are given a PCAP file from a potential security incident. What is the first thing you should look for to identify the two primary devices involved in a suspicious conversation? You should look at the source IP and destination IP addresses. These two columns will tell you which two devices were communicating with each other, forming the basis for the rest of your investigation. Great job! Now that we know the tool, let's use it to deconstruct a real attack.
Welcome to Lesson 4.3, Practical Analysis, Deconstructing a Web Server Attack. Theory is one thing, but a defender's real work happens in the trenches. We are now going to apply everything we've learned. You will act as a security analyst investigating suspicious activity on a web server. Using a real PCAP file, you will trace the attacker's steps through the cyber kill chain. Our learning objective is to analyze a PCAP file to identify the attacker's IP, the tool they used, and the credentials they stole. This will be a guided walkthrough of a web server attack. Our scenario: a company has detected suspicious activity on an internal web server with the IP address 10.0.0.112 and has captured the network traffic. Our job is to analyze it. Step 1. Identifying the scan, Reconnaissance. As we scroll through the PCAP, we immediately see one IP address, 14.0.0.120, sending thousands of requests to many different ports on our server in a very short time. This is an Nmap port scan. Our attacker's IP is 14.0.0.120. This is our first IOC. Step 2. Identifying the enumeration tool, Reconnaissance. After the scan, we see thousands of HTTP requests from the attacker's IP to different web directories. By applying a filter for HTTP traffic and inspecting the user agent field in one of these requests, we see it doesn't say Chrome or Firefox, but instead says GoBuster. The attacker is using this tool to brute force web directories. Step 3. Finding the credential theft. Actions on objectives. We need to find how the attacker logged in. We can use a Wireshark filter to look for HTTP packets that contain the word authorization. This filter reveals a packet where the credentials are sent in plain text. Username Tomcat, password Tomcat. The attacker successfully guessed or brute forced the login. Now, a quick exercise. You want to find the exact moment the attacker uploaded their malicious file. You know this would be an HTTP post request. What Wireshark display filter would you use to find only these requests? The correct filter would be http.request.method=post. This will show you only the packets where a client was sending data to the server.
To wrap up our analysis, based on what we found, let's describe the attack sequence in 3 steps, linking each step to a phase of the cyber kill chain. Reconnaissance. The attacker at 14.0.0.120 performed an Nmap scan to find open ports, and then used GoBuster to find web directories. Exploitation, or gaining access. The attacker used the discovered credentials tomcat.tomcat to log into the web server's admin panel. Installation, or actions on objectives. From here, the attacker sent commands to the server to establish persistence or exfiltrate data. This practical analysis brings together everything we've learned. In our final module, we'll discuss your path forward in cybersecurity.
Module 5. Your path forward in cybersecurity. End of Lesson 5.1. Welcome to Lesson 5.1. From Theory to Practice, Next Steps in Your Learning Journey. You have completed a journey through the mind of an attacker and the tools of a defender. This course is a powerful foundation, but it is just the beginning. The world of cybersecurity is vast and constantly evolving. This final lesson is about giving you a map and compass for what comes next. Our learning objective is to identify 3 resources for continued hands-on cybersecurity practice. We'll highlight key platforms where you can apply your knowledge in real-world scenarios. The most important thing to remember is that you cannot learn cybersecurity from books alone. Practical, hands-on experience is essential. Here are some recommended platforms for practice. Cyber Defenders, an excellent platform focused on defensive security or blue teaming. It has many PCAP analysis challenges, just like the one we completed. Try HackMe, a beginner-friendly platform that teaches offensive security or red teaming through hands-on labs in your browser. It's a great way to learn about the tools attackers use. Hack the Box, a more advanced platform for penetration testing practice with hundreds of vulnerable virtual machines to challenge your skills. As an activity, I encourage you to plan your path. Visit the Cyber Defenders and Try HackMe websites. Find one lab or room on each platform that looks interesting to you and is labeled as easy or beginner. This will be your first step after completing this course. Now for our assessment. Why is it valuable for a defender, a blue teamer, to practice on offensive security platforms like Try HackMe? It is valuable because the best way to defend against an attacker is to understand how they think and what tools they use. By practicing offensive techniques, a defender learns to recognize attack patterns, anticipate an attacker's next move, and identify the traces and IOCs their tools leave behind. You have the resources. In our final lesson, we will recap the entire course and talk about the defensive mindset. Welcome to our final lesson, Lesson 5.2, Course Recap and Cultivating a Defensive Mindset. We've come full circle. We started by learning the attacker's roadmap, the cyber kill chain. We deconstructed each step, from reconnaissance to action. Then, we put on our defender's hat and learned to trace those steps backward using digital evidence. This final lesson will tie everything together. Our learning objective is to summarize the cyber kill chain and explain how understanding it benefits a defender. We will reinforce the key takeaway that defense is about breaking the chain at any point. Let's revisit the full picture, the cyber kill chain, one last time. Reconnaissance, they research you. Weaponization, they build their tool. Delivery, they send it to you. Exploitation, you click it and it runs. Installation, it burrows in to stay. Command and control, it phones home for orders. Actions on objectives, it does what it was designed to do. But here is the defender's advantage. The attacker has to succeed at every single stage to win. As a defender, your job is to break the chain. You can block the recon with good privacy settings, block the delivery with an email filter, block the exploitation with software patches, block the installation with antivirus, or block the C2 traffic with a firewall. Breaking the chain at any one of these points stops the attack. Now take a moment for self-reflection. Think about your own security, personal or professional. Can you identify one single action to take this week to weaken a link in the cyber kill chain for a potential attacker? Perhaps it's updating a browser, changing a default password, or reviewing social media privacy settings. Finally, for our last assessment, an attacker sends a phishing email to an employee, but the company's email security gateway detects the malicious attachment and deletes the email before the employee ever sees it. Which phase of the cyber kill chain was broken? The delivery phase was broken. The attacker's weapon was stopped in transit and never reached the intended target, successfully thwarting the attack.
Course conclusion and final thoughts. Congratulations on completing the Introduction to Cyber Attacks for Beginners Master Course. You began this journey with a simple question: how do attackers operate? Over 5 modules, you have traveled deep into the attacker's mindset, dissecting their strategic roadmap, the cyber kill chain, phase by phase. From the quiet intelligence gathering of Reconnaissance to the final actions on objectives, you have seen how a theoretical plan becomes a practical attack. You then switched roles, becoming the defender. You learned that attacks are not invisible magic. They leave behind digital breadcrumbs, indicators of compromise. We took this theoretical knowledge and applied it in a real-world scenario, analyzing a PCAP file with Wireshark to reconstruct an attack piece by piece. You traced the attacker's scan, identified their tools, and uncovered the very credentials they stole. The single most important principle we've covered is the strategic advantage the cyber kill chain gives to a defender. Remember, an attacker must succeed at every single phase to win. As a defender, you only need to break one link in that chain to be successful. The power this gives you is immense. You no longer see security as a simple, static wall, but as a series of layered, interconnected defenses. You now possess a defender's mindset, one built on curiosity, vigilance, and the understanding that every digital trace tells a story. The skills you have built here are your foundation. The real learning happens when you apply them. I strongly encourage you to take the next step and explore the resources we discussed. Challenge yourself with new PCAP files on cyber defenders. Learn the attacker's tools on TryHackMe. Continue to be curious, continue to learn, and continue to question. Thank you for your dedication throughout this course. Stay vigilant and happy defending.